Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And it's Ben.
on Spoiled Rotten.
Oh, that jail.
Boom. Well, we are continuing to revisit the MCU. It's Doctor Strange, which won't mean anything to you when you listen to this, but we did just do Doctor Strange 2 last week. So what a wonderful world it is.
It's fun. You know, I imagine that I time traveled myself to watch 2 and then 1.
Very good time travel. Yeah, I think it's a solid movie.
Yeah.
I think first time I saw it, I was very like, wow, I like that way more than I thought I would. Which I don't think I've really like gone back on that. It's just obviously we've seen way more from the MCU. So it's not as exciting, but it's still I think good. I think my big thing with it is it's not really, it seems even less interested in the villain than other movies, which I personally don't have a problem with, but I can see that being like a downside for some people. Like I'm pretty sure I paid attention. It was like around the 50-minute mark before Caecilius came back. He's kind of just gone from the movie. And you're like, oh yeah, I guess he's got to do something.
It's like, oh yeah, he's got to go to school, he's got to learn all the books, and there's also a threat. It's kind of like a Voldemort situation where it's like, oh, he's nice to wait until the end of the school year all the time.
Very nice of him to not disturb anything. But I guess in this movie we usually try and give some kind of a refresher. Stephen Strange, a very cocky surgeon, gets into a car accident. He seeks out ways to get use of his hands back. He hears about a place that gave someone the ability to walk again after crushing. They give the like number like C7, C8 crushed in his,
basically what you shouldn't be able to walk from anymore.
You shouldn't be able to walk, and he is able to walk
and play basketball.
That's true. He meets him playing basketball, so he's not just walking, he's able to play basketball. And he finds out about wizardry and sorcery in the MCU and becomes, well, a different version of Doctor Strange.
So different version. I guess the better version,
a different version,
an innocent version, the more innocent version. I don't even know if that's true.
I don't think
he's still as arrogant.
Yeah, he's pretty arrogant. I think he's just a different version of it. I think this watch through, what I liked was, I don't really know how to specifically put it into one sentence, but the idea that there's more than one way to look at things is what happens throughout the whole movie, and I do appreciate that. Like even in stuff like when he's like showing off in front of Dr. West and embarrassing him, it is because Dr. West was like, well, this is the only way, and the guy's dead, and Doctor Strange is able to be like, no, you're just not thinking about it in the right way. He fixes it, and then he comes up against something where it's like, oh no, like I don't have to think about it differently, it's just this is the way it is. And the Ancient One is able to be like, no, you aren't thinking about it the right way. And so I think that is throughout, and obviously that plays into Caecilius and Mordo, in terms of Mordo being like, no, there is no other way to think about it other than what I was taught when I first got to Kamar-Taj. Even though even his teacher is thinking about things differently, Caecilius is thinking about things differently. So I do like that is a through line throughout the movie. And so it does give me the ability to not really mind that the villain isn't like a constant threat throughout, because you are still engaging in that thought process throughout the whole thing, and you're trying to get Stephen to get there so that I think people think it's not all about you, but I think that's just a spin-off of thinking about things differently and expanding your scope,
Yeah.
basically, just trying to expand your scope. Because it's not all about him, but also I think we realized that it's the second movie that we just watched that actually gets him there, where he feels like it's not just about me, because that one's dealing with sacrifice, so he's sacrificing that idea. But this one, I think, is more, just broaden your scope. You don't have to just throw up your hands and be like, well, there's only one way to do this.
It's I like what you're saying about that heavily, because after reviewing Doctor Strange 2, and you're like, okay, right off the bat, it's about sacrifice. And right off that scene, it's all about like finding a different way, right? Like very much what you said. And I think it's not so much what the Ancient One says when she says, and you said the line earlier, it's not about you.
Yeah.
But the first scene where he gets to Carmitage and it's like, open your eye, and touches him on the forehead, and just like the whole thing, just like, here's all the stuff you didn't see. And then she says something very, very specific, like, imagine the worlds beyond your own senses and all that kind of stuff. Or I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact words, but it's just like the idea of there's more beyond what you can see, and there's more beyond what you can understand. And like, it's that's a through line throughout the whole movie. Even like Mordo at the end, him being like, oh, I see now. Like, I see a different perspective. Even Wong too. Like, now arguably the Wong thing is like, my inclusion of this is a joke, because it's like, oh, did he know about Beyonce before he started showing up and all those pop culture references? Or was he genuinely like, let me check this person out. Let me see what this Beyonce is all about.
I think that was more of him making room for Steven's style, because he laughs at the end at Steven's joke about like, well, you got to read the whole thing because they put the warnings at the end, which goes back to when he was admonishing him earlier. Sorry, I should use names. When Wong and Mordo were admonishing Steven earlier, and he was like, yeah, they should really put the warnings at the beginning. And again, I think that's pretty good writing, where it's like at the end of the movie, aka end of the book, he's like, yeah, now I get it, like that. But also Wong being like, okay, yeah, that is funny, like, I get it. And obviously you saw him earlier listening to Single Ladies after that whole like, come on, you must know Beyonce, she's so famous. So I do think that everyone is forced to look at things differently than they used to in the movie. And I don't think everyone reacts well to it. Obviously Mordo being one of them, but because even though he's shifting, it's still shifting to serve his purposes, which is, well, I'm just going to get rid of everybody that's doing what I don't want them to do, as opposed to actually accepting that like there is a different way. He's just like, oh, okay, well, I'll just stop trying to be nice about it and kill everybody.
I think another,
not kill, but I'll take away their power. Which will put them in a bad place.
Powers are like Pokemon in this universe. I gotta get them all. It's interesting because I noted one thing in that idea of embracing a different perspective. The characters that can't embrace a different perspective ultimately meet their demise in this movie, being the Ancient One and Caecilius, right? Ancient One doesn't actually take on a new perspective. Ancient One is just the Ancient One being like, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know, and I can't see past this point in time, which means I die, right? And then Caecilius, because obviously the Ancient One using some of the dark magic or whatever it is, and Caecilius being like, this is the only way, we got to release Dormammu, and you know, all that kind of stuff. They're not being able to see a different perspective.
I actually think the Ancient One is seeing it. I think
really,
well, the whole thing is she's the Ancient One. She has lived beyond, because she kept thinking like, no, I just have to keep going or else this will all fall apart. But I think it's her seeing like, this has to keep going, and Steven is the person who can keep this going.
Oh, I
it's
see.
Time for me to stop trying to see beyond this point. It's because it's not about her either. It's not about him. It's not about her. So it is her being like, I get it now. Like, we have to make room for this new energy to keep this thing going.
That's a good point.
I think that is what's happening. Yeah, because there's all that talk about like, and I think this might be the first time it actually stuck with me. I'm sure I heard the line before, but like, oh, that's why she's the Ancient One, because she's using dark magic to stay beyond, meaning she's compromising herself to keep going. And I think she's realizing, I don't have to make this compromise. Like, it isn't about me staying alive forever to keep this on track. Yeah, I should be making room for other stuff. And
Mhm.
by doing that, yes, she passes away, but she's not like, oh, I'm dying. She's like, yeah, like this is it. This is where I leave you. And
Yeah.
hopefully you keep this going. But it's not for me to like hold on to your hand the whole time or to hold on
Mhm.
to the Sorcerer Supreme title anymore. I need to make room for that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very grieving process. Obviously, we are talking about death in
Mhm.
this thing, but like this is obviously someone that has, and I think anyone would in that situation look for different ways to get beyond that point, knowing what that, if you can't look beyond that point, it probably means you're dead, right?
Mhm.
If you're looking for all those ways and finally at the end, you're like, I'm just, because in that scene, she just accepts it.
Yeah.
And that's probably the difference, is stop looking for different things and accept the reality that's in front of you. That's a good point that you brought up. So she does accept it, and I guess the death is her release from having to use that dark energy
Mhm.
and being and passing on to the new thing, kind of like, you know, just the death of something gives life to another thing, right? Sort of Doctor Strange,
that's
just
what it is.
Sorcerer Supreme kind of thing. Yeah, passing the torch, so to speak.
Yes, I do think that's the case.
Mhm.
Which kind of like they double down on in Endgame when Hulk meets up with her and she's kind of like, oh, Steven, okay, well,
Mhm.
if he thought of it, then it must be the way
Yeah.
to be. Like that
Yeah.
has to be it because I
Mhm.
sacrifice. No, I shouldn't even say sacrifice. I think it really is just truly understanding that like I've lived many lifetimes. It's time for me to like let go of the idea that I have to live forever.
Yeah. I think in the Endgame thing, though, that's more uniquely tied to, oh, Stephen Strange, who I know is supposed to be the greatest, decided this. Like someone wiser than me decided this. So therefore, there must be a reason. So I'm going to give it up. Like that's how I read that Endgame situation,
But
but I
that's what
could
I
be
mean.
wrong.
Like that
Yeah.
she was like, this is me. Like it can't be the way I would do things. I
Oh, I
need
see.
to let
Mhm.
I need to let Steven do his thing.
Mhm.
And so then in Endgame, when she's like, no, this is the way life is, and then he's like, well, Doctor Strange told us this. It's her being like, the person that like I just told, like it's not about you
Mhm.
or whatever. Not just, but you know what I mean. Like
Mhm. Mhm.
it is her remembering, well, I did make room for him to do his thing. So it would be silly of me to hold on to what I believe is true
Mhm.
if the person that I let take over is giving this direction.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So we're saying the same thing is what I'm saying. Like,
True.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a double down on this, her death in this, which is
Gotcha.
I've made room for Steven's way of doing things
Yeah.
instead of holding on to my ways.
I feel what's really like, while you just briefly while you're bringing it up, I think what was brilliant about including the Ancient One in that scene with the Hulk in Endgame is the idea. It's like, yeah, they weren't absent during the fight of New York; they were just protecting themselves. And like, yeah, that's just a great little thing. That's
There's
just
even a line in this movie,
Mhm.
like Doctor Strange movie, that hints. I mean, who knows what they were thinking when they said it, but it's just like
Mhm.
you hearing it now, knowing what we know, it's like, well, she could be talking about how she helped out during the events of the Avengers.
Mhm.
So I like that it still works even if you're just watching this movie in a vacuum.
Yeah, yeah. Now, one thing that I wanted to ask you your opinions on, now having watched Doctor Strange 2, the sling rings in this movie are described as portals to the multiverse, specifically multiverse, they say, like over and over again. Wong or the Ancient One just goes like, just picture a place in your mind and just like focus and get there, right? You'll get there. So to me, I'm a little confused about why America Chavez was the MacGuffin in Doctor Strange 2, when it seems like if it was true, any sling ring could have done. Like Wanda could have just grabbed a sling ring and just gotten to where she needed to go, you know, like it, or something like that to that degree. But do you think that's weird to you now, rewatching this movie and then knowing what happens in Doctor Strange 2?
No, not really.
Okay. I wish they just said the universe, as in like there's a limitation beyond the multiverse, because like the Ancient One is so clear about like there's an infinite amount of multiverses and all that kind of stuff. And when they describe the sling ring as like, oh, this can get you into any multiverse, I'm like, Yikes, that's a bit rough. I took a little bit of issue to it, but that's me definitely picking semantics.
Yeah, this isn't really
Okay.
like we don't really get a good answer for what America Chavez does, but
Mhm.
my assumption is everyone is on board with the fact that it would be easier to use her power than a sling ring. That's the one thing that's made clear in the second movie. Everyone's like, just fucking kill her, take the power, and you can do what we need to do instead of trying to do it through a sling ring.
But I just don't
To me,
understand
it's
the
like,
sling ring's
would you
so
would you
accessible.
rather use a gun or a bow and arrow?
For what purpose? I'm assuming
Well,
it's just
what
to kill
would
a
you use a
person.
gun for?
Just to kill a person, right?
Yes, yeah.
Well, hunting. Like I'm not going straight to
Again,
murder.
you're still killing
I'm
when you're
assuming,
hunting.
yes, but not a person. Straight up, just like it's easier in my
Okay,
mind.
well
Anyways,
let's dismiss the semantics, and
I would
you
rather
understand
use a-
what a gun and bow and arrow are used for.
I would
you
rather use a bow and arrow
Okay, well then that's why you're hung up on the sling ring thing.
because I would because
Yeah.
I would much rather be bad at the sport and not kill anything at the end of the day. It'd be like I went hunting, air quotes. Because
Okay, well you're not,
wanna-
I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying.
No, I'm
But-
purposely being a brat here. But yeah, I get what you're saying. The American Chavez power would be like, hey, punch, as opposed to sling ring. At least you have to learn the thing, but whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't really bother me at
Okay.
all because what was made clear to me was one is way easier than the other.
Fair. Okay.
But yeah, I'm sure you're not the only one that had an issue with that, but I
Mm.
think that overall my thoughts are, it seems to me like everyone in this movie, even if I don't understand it, agrees it's easier to do what America Chavez is doing.
Fair enough. All right.
So what else happens in this? So yeah, we're introduced to Christine Palmer. Yeah,
Doesn't
I
give
don't
a lot
know.
to do in this movie,
No,
unfortunately.
she doesn't, but I think this is also why I don't want to make it about the stuff we've seen since.
Yeah.
But I think it's also why I didn't really get on board with that episode. That I guess we're the only ones who didn't like that episode of What If.
The what if? Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm like, this movie pretty much is like, yeah, that relationship is dead, and he didn't. Even if he's trying to protect himself, he's just really shitty to where I'm not really rooting for them to be together.
Yeah. Neither am I. I'm like, they should definitely find a relationship that's healthier because
I mean, and Christine does. That's how the second movie
Yes.
starts. But like,
absolutely.
I was just like, I'm not really on board with, oh yeah, man, like I love you in every universe, and what if, like I gotta find ways that you don't die. I can understand him not wanting to die, her to die. I just didn't really see her as the love of his life.
I agree.
He
I
even
agree.
says we barely dated. We were barely lovers. We're not
Yeah.
friends. We were barely lovers. So I
But-
understand he could just be protecting himself,
Yeah.
but to say that is to diminish, like he's sabotaging it himself. Like, and I'm not really like on
absolutely.
board after that. If you're willing to go there,
So the only justification I can see that he thinks that of her, but not her thinking that of him. You know what I mean? Like I feel like he could be like, okay, because this version, like the version of Doctor Strange, he's so arrogant that you're like, yeah, who would you love? And if Christine and you had the back and forth and all that kind of stuff, then I could see why he'd be confusing that as the love of his life. But she's very clear. It's like, no, you were a summer fling. You were, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I could see how he would twist it, but she wouldn't. Because it is
Yeah,
from his
I
perspective.
mean, either way, I don't understand why they tried to like pin, oh, this is the love of his life on that episode, because sure, he got it twisted, but it's clear we see that he has it twisted, so we know that that's not the love. He's just, yeah, he's misunderstood what happened then, regardless. So I'm not on board, and I'm not saying you're on board either, but like, yeah, that explanation doesn't really help him in terms, or that storyline. But yeah, she's in it. She gives him his watch. Oh man, who else is in this movie? The ancient one. I don't really want to talk about the ancient one that much, but she
I think
is
we
in
have
it. And
done the ancient one to death in the first time that we recorded this episode. So
yeah, I think we were positive on it, but I get that everyone's like it's still whitewashing, and
listen, I
feel
don't
like
like I
it's.
would much rather a whitewashed character than a heavily racist
But the
Asian
thing is,
character.
she's not playing the same character. They
Exactly.
just decided ancient one is a title.
Yeah.
She's the current ancient one. And it
Well,
didn't erase the ability for other characters of East Asian descent to be in the movie.
yeah. It also
I understand that she took up a role that could have been, but yeah, I understand people's frustration with it. I just brought it up to say that and acknowledge that yeah, the first time we reviewed this, I was way more positive on it.
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't think about that. And obviously you have your own opinion on it. I'm not trying to bulldoze your opinion.
No, absolutely not. This is one of those situations I'm like, what benefit do we get from putting a heavily stereotyped Asian man in that role? Because I feel like in terms of representation, Wong was so much better handled in the idea that
And
Wong
he's better than he is in the comics.
Exactly. In the comics, he's described literally as a manservant, which is to me like so much worse as like Asian stereotypes, right? So rewriting that to be like, I'm the librarian, I'm the keeper of the books and all that kind of stuff, and then later on he gets to be Sorcerer Supreme. I'm like, no, that's my celebration. If we're like really pissed off about like Asian representation here, I'm like, it's pissing me off that people don't talk about how well Wong is doing in this movie too. Like, that's my thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I also understand that my opinion on it doesn't go for as much in this case, for obvious reasons. But I do feel like if they elevated a role, that would have gone to an Asian man, and then decided to sidestep an what could have been a problematic stereotype with the ancient one.
And I am good with that, because then we have a situation
I was positive on it, but I still get lived. They should have tried to find a way, I guess, is even what Kevin Feige came down on. But
then you got to change the whole setting. Kamar-Taj has to be in Asia. Then if you're gonna commit to that, then you got to go like, oh, it's in China, it's in this, it's like, it's something like that. You have to do that, because it's just like, wait, the ancient one's also Chinese. And then in Kamar-Taj,
well, isn't she supposed to be, or the character is Tibetan?
Sorry, Tibetan. Sorry. Yeah. So like, it is, or like in Asia, but like, it doesn't seem like Tibet. It's like, you know what I mean? It's India there.
Yeah. Well,
so it's just like, it's all over the place. Where I'm like, what are we really doing here? Because of like the place, the setting is off, everything is off. So I'm good with that, as opposed to being like, oh, this is comic accurate to make a whole bunch of people happy, but then it makes a whole bunch of people more unhappy. And I feel, and the sorcerer, to correct you earlier, you said that the ancient one was a title. Ancient one's not a title. The Sorcerer Supreme's the title. It's just the ancient one.
No, this movie has made it seem like this is an ancient one. Yeah, and that was all the stuff they were talking about going into the movie. Even if it doesn't say it specifically in the movie, they are saying ancient one is a title.
Okay, I'd interpret that differently, but either way, but yeah, we definitely agree differently on this situation.
Agree differently.
We have a difference of opinion. of whether or not the ancient one should have been an Asian person.
I'm not saying one way or the other.
Right. Okay. I definitely.
I'm saying I was happy with the change, but I understand why people would be frustrated. And I'm not talking about people who wanted it to be comic accurate. I'm talking about East Asian people who were upset that a possible role was taken away. I understand that frustration. That's all I'm saying.
I understand their frustration, but I'm also like, when I engage heavily in those discussions with other Asians, they're like, yeah, I see your point. I really, that wouldn't have been fun.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not here to be like, it should have been this way or that way. I was happy with the change. I also understand the business reasons they made the change.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that I'm like, so all the people who are frustrated should shut up about it.
I don't think that's what's being said at all. I just think to give voice to the obvious thing, and Tilda Swinton just doing Tilda Swinton things. Cool.
Yeah. Mordo. What a guy.
What a guy.
The first bit, he seems pretty fun, I gotta say. And then just, yeah, like he's a funny guy.
He does a lot of quips. He is like, oh, it's a Wi-Fi password. We're
Yeah,
all
I remember-
savages. Like, that's such a great line.
Do you remember that from the trailer and being like, yeah, it still works this
Yeah.
many years later?
Mhm.
But then yeah, I'm not saying this as like it sucks. I'm just saying like it's a very clear character beat of like, yeah, it was fun until you messed with what I think is the way of the world. So fuck
Yeah.
you. And now I'm upset about it.
Now I'm evil. And now I
Well,
don't
that
like
they
you in
do
every
keep the evil
universe.
for the end. I do think that they didn't make him evil right away. They were just like,
Yeah.
he's having a hard time with this, and one by one, like Wong gets on board with it. Then he's like, wow, the person that I was like loyal to, the ancient one, is on board with this. Maybe I'm rooting for the wrong team here.
Yeah.
But
I like that he makes that decision, but at the end of the movie where it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not bailing. I'm gonna finish this up, and then yeah, I'm gonna make a decision later. I really like
and
that.
I think it is because he sees Wong be like okay with it. I think it's like, sure, right now we need to fix this. That's very clear. But then I think he's like, wait, so you're just okay with what he did? I can't be on board with this. I'm done. And I think that was well done in that way. It sucks that he's gone bad, and kind of sucks that we haven't seen this version, 616 version of him ever again. But
Oh god, yeah, that bothers me so much.
I thought it was strong. I'm pretty sure the first time we watched it, and it his beats held up to me.
I agree. Chitwell is great.
Because
I
they
can't
didn't try
say
to
his name
villainize
properly, but
Chiwetel.
Chiwetel. Sorry.
But he did, yeah, they didn't try to like demonize him. It is a very understandable frustration he has.
Yeah.
Which is, sure, you could blame him for just being like, oh, you just want things the way you want them. He's like, no, there's very real consequences for what you're doing. And it kind of undercuts what we're trying to do as a whole if you're going to keep doing this stuff. I'm not sure I'm completely on board with him. Like, so now I'll just kill all the sorcerers, but at least I understand that he's like, there's no reasoning with these people. Like, I gotta just take away their powers if they're going to be doing this stuff.
Yeah. Even if it is just to walk around and play basketball, I'm gonna bully this guy, which seems so mean. I was just like, oh man, he literally just stopped learning, and like he just wanted to walk, and he took that away from him. Also, so mean.
It does bring up the question of like, if you can do that, why didn't he just do that to Cassalius?
Yeah,
just take away his power.
It's so weird. Well,
unless
he said months later, so maybe I'm assuming he learned. Yeah, because like I feel like that's some sort of dark magic.
Okay, well that's fair then. Then I retract my question, because you're right. There was definitely time for him to just learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, then it all worked out then.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess it just doesn't make sense that he literally never comes back up. But I mean, like, one could argue that he got dusted, and therefore, which, oh damn, I hate how I do that. I get in my own head and then I say something that makes me look like an idiot.
I don't think you look like an idiot.
That's a great reason why he wouldn't be around, because he got dusted. Damn it. There's a 50% chance of that happening. Should have taken that chance. Oh well.
So yeah, that's Mordo, and I'll save Wong for later, and obviously we'll get to Steven. Cassalius.
Oh, what an ineffective villain.
It's interesting because I guess they really just wanted to end on Dormammu.
Yep.
So I don't know if he's ineffective because he gets them there.
Yeah, he's like a henchman.
Yeah.
He's like he's like Harrow. He's like, I serve Khonshu, like kind of thing. He's not
Amit.
really the main threat. Oh yeah, Amit.
By the time we see him, he's serving Amit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, he's more like a hero. I did like um I do remember thinking the trailer version of it was better, but I do like that exchange he has with Doctor Strange where he's like, Mr. Doctor. He's like, it's strange. And he's like, I don't know. Who am I to judge? Like maybe.
I did like that a lot.
I
He
do
just-
like Mads Mikkelsen's delivery of that.
Yeah. Does he even do that here? Because I feel like he doesn't. He just kind of walks and goes like Doctor Strange.
He does it in the movie, and then later he even says, "Okay, listen, Mr. Doctor." He's like, "No, it's Doctor Strange." He's like, "Oh, you are a doctor." They do have the exchanges. Just I think they used a better cut of it in the trailer. But yeah, it's like his showdown with Doctor Strange is really strong. I think because they've at least set up that he could kill Doctor Strange, so you are like, oh, like this is a big deal. Doctor Strange has to do this on his own, and I think that in that it's effective. And I like that they're having like not the characters, but the actors are having fun throughout the scene. Like just the whole like, I guess Christine uses it in the second movie when she like lights what looks like a garbage pail and goes like go back to hell or something. But Doctor Strange uses it in this, and Cassius is like, "Oh, you don't know how to use that, do you?" He's just like, just like throws it at him. Yeah, I think all of that is good, but it is kind of like when he's not on screen, it's not like you're like, "What's he up to?" You're just like, "Oh yeah, I guess we have to deal with him again at some point."
Yeah, I guess like we've hit unpause. Like this is a good point to bring up the main the main villain.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll agree with you as I said up top. It's not that interested in the villains, but I do think the character work throughout is fine in terms of like you learn about the world that they're in.
Yeah,
which is still important. And I think well done. So yeah, I guess we can talk about Wong.
Yeah,
he's great. I'm a big fan of Wong.
Awesome.
And I'm so happy he keeps coming back.
Yep. Glad he's not dead. Glad he keeps doing things.
I forgot that he dies in this and then they just reverse it. And I'm like, good. I'm glad. I don't want him to die ever.
Yeah. Wong forever.
Yeah.
He's so good.
So yeah, he does start off as the librarian.
Yeah.
But obviously just maybe that's just what he wanted to do, but he's obviously very capable because he just like shows up and keeps showing up and being effective even in battle throughout all the movies we've seen him in this movie in particular. But yeah, I like how they play off each other. I know you can't do it, but it would be interesting to see the three of them still play off of each other. Like there's the shot at the end where it is Mordo, Strange, and Wong, and I'm like, yeah, like I like these three together because they push each other. I feel like they actually there is the built-in conflict there that makes scenes with them interesting all the time. And it makes sense that he wouldn't just stick around. That Mordo wouldn't just stick around, but it is like I like the three of them. It would have been nice to see them together again.
Oh, I heavily agree with that. I'm just like, oh, like when all three of them were fighting together at the end, I'm like, how great is this? This is really cool. And then Mordo just has his own moral revelation. It says peace, which I respect him for.
Yeah, you got to respect that. And Wong just gets on board with Steven. As I said, he won him over because he sees the talent and that he's actually like, I know they're talking about his like photographic memory or whatever, but I think even Mordo says like it's more than that. Obviously, it's not just that you remember the stuff; you just have an aptitude for this.
Yeah.
And I think Wong recognizes that, so it's cool that they're still together.
Yeah. Because I like how when he's like conjuring up the spells in the library, And then the Agent One, like in the next scene, calls him out on. It's like, Wong told on me. It's like the reaction that he gets. Wong told on me. I'm like, it's so funny because it's so like chummy and buddy already. It's great. I love that dynamic,
Yeah,
and they just build it
they've
off
got a
in
great
future
dynamic.
movies. It's really good. Him and Wong.
All right, so Stephen Strange. I watched this keeping in mind that people think this is just a retread of Iron Man 1.
Yes.
I don't agree. I think if you're going on rich guy gets injured and then comes out of it a superhero, then yeah, I guess so. But I think that there's an actual shift in Stephen Strange. That's why I said he's different at the end. But that's not the case for Tony Stark at the end of Iron Man. He's not like, he is like, I should just be using my weapons differently. He's not really like, oh, I need to change. Like it's even him being like, I am Iron Man. Like it's just like, it's still all about me, and I'll never not let it be all about me. I haven't learned to be selfless. It's just in fact, the lesson he learns is, you know what? I've been giving too many people control. I need to take it all back.
It's true. I see why you're saying that. I am still on the camp that this is basically Iron Man 1 in that formulaic sense. Obviously very formulaic, but Iron Man changes at the end. Because he changes from the perspective of like, okay, well, he's going to use his stuff for good as opposed to just
But
profit.
he never thought he was using it for bad. That's the whole point of the speech at the beginning. My dad always said, you got the bigger stick or whatever. Yeah. He's wrong, but he doesn't ever think he's doing the wrong thing. Yeah. And as I said, he was like, oh, it's because I let all these other people make decisions. I should be making the decisions. Yeah. But that's true. And that's fundamentally different than what we just talked about with Doctor Strange, which is you need to open yourself up to different points of view. Yeah. And I think I don't really see, because this movie also isn't, I guess the first one isn't either, but like he doesn't form a better relationship with the female character in it, even if you want to do formulaic like one-to-one stuff like that, like Pepper Potts, Christine Palmer. He's I just don't really see how it actually is the same formula. I understand people say that without really ever substantiating it, but I don't see how watching the two of them leads you to the conclusion that if we're actually doing a deep dive on it, it's the same thing. Well,
I feel like the thing I think about all the time is, are we saying that it's the same thing, or are we saying it's the same formula? Because it is formulaically very, very similar.
How?
Right? In the sense where, like you said, the hero gets injured, does this, isolated, looks for something new, finds it, and then shares the boon with the world and all that kind of stuff. You're right to bring up those subtle differences, but the overall structure of the movie is very, very similar. To me, at this point, I think to myself, okay, if the formula was so successful, why would you not repeat it? Because it's not like I walk away from this movie being like, oh, this sucks because it's like Iron Man 1. I'd be like, yeah, it's kind of like Iron Man 1, but it's like formulaic, but I don't think it takes away from it for myself personally. But I see
it's what an origin story of a hero.
That's how I feel. Yeah, it's just a classic origin story.
I don't know. That seems like a weak thing. It seems like a weak thing to bring up. It's a origin story. It's like, yeah, I know. I could have told you that before seeing the movie. It doesn't show me that you've actually engaged with the movie to be like, it's an origin story.
But it feels
the trailer tells you it's an origin story. So yeah,
right.
But when you actually watch it, to point out specifically Iron Man 1, I think there needs to be a little bit more to it than just broad strokes that you could have said ahead of seeing the movie.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. You could definitely nitpick at the idea of the broad strokes and all that kind of stuff, because I am painting with a big brush here. But like I said, I'm in that camp that sees the similarities. I don't hate the similarities anymore. I used to be very vocal about them. Now I'm just like, yeah, if it worked, why not? And plus, like afterwards, they changed it up. The next Marvel hero they introduced was like Captain Marvel, and then they really made a dedication of like, oh, we're going to change this up by telling the origin story through that like rewind sequence
Mhm.
that the skull the Kree do, or all that kind of stuff. So it's, obviously them being like, okay, yeah, it worked, we got away with it again, it's not a bad movie but because of that. But they just need to shake it up. I'm fine with that.
It's fair. I'm still
Yeah.
not really convinced, but you're in the majority there. I think that it's a lazy thing to bring up, and I'm not saying you're bringing it, as you say, you're not bringing it up as
Yeah.
a bad thing. You're
Yeah.
like, yeah, it worked the first time. Why not do it again? I think the criticism, when it's used as a criticism, it's a lazy one, because
Yeah, I
like
do agree with that.
you're like, I'm always about like the medium is the message. So yeah, like at this point they're making superhero origin movies.
Mhm.
So that would be like saying like, oh, this rom-com did the thing where they do that. I'm like, yeah, like that's what people are
Like every
signing on for.
rom-com,
Like
yeah.
it's a rom-com. So I expect them to do rom-com things. It's
Yeah.
about the actual characters in it that makes
Yes.
the difference. And to
Yeah.
me, they're not that similar.
Yeah, like I love when people critique rom-coms like, oh, it's the same movie all the single time. I'm like, so you think an action movie is different? How? Like,
Yeah.
it's not different. It's just like, oh, the choice of gun or like the
Yeah.
choice of weapon is different, or like the guy's trauma is different. But like, honestly, it's the exact same movie. Like, what rom-coms are to people that like rom-coms are what action movies to people that like action movies. It's
Yeah.
comforting joy.
That's what I mean by like people being like, oh, it's just the MCU form. I'm like, well, it's an origin story.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's gonna be things that, as I said, before you watch the movie, you can assume will happen.
Yeah.
It's not really engaging with the actual
Mhm.
text if you're
Plus-
just gonna say it's the same thing.
Yeah. Plus, like I've mentioned it before on this podcast before, like every story can be broken down into the hero's journey. Every story. So it's just like, okay, then has every story been told already? Yes. Formulaically, skeleton wise, but
Yeah.
why would you not insert the backstory of why this character does this, which enriches the whole thing, as opposed to like, oh yeah, he didn't have cheese, so he went to the store to buy cheese from this cheesemaker, and then he went home and to eat the cheese and share with his friends. Like that's what every hero movie is. He didn't have the thing, goes gets the thing, share does the thing, shares the reward with the whole world. That's every hero story.
Yeah.
So when people, I agree with you. I'm with the people that are like, yeah, I see the similarities, but to say it as a criticism is lazy. It's entirely lazy as a criticism.
Yeah. And
Which is why I'm not going to say it.
Why people like Doctor Strange and Iron Man together is because they are fundamentally different. Because you're
Yes.
getting two assholes, but they're coming at it from different ways.
It's true. There's
Meaning,
such
yeah, like
assholes.
it's otherwise you'd just be like, oh, it's just two assholes.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing.
I don't want to watch.
It would fundamentally change how you appreciate them in Infinity War.
Exactly. Two
Um,
assholes doing the same thing just makes me be like, oh no, it just feels
mean,
like
you
they're
could be
teaming
like
together.
Yeah, like, or it could be like Rocket and Star-Lord, two assholes who have like this similar like commitment things, but like, or Yondu and Rocket, but
Good call.
that is that's a different dynamic than
Yes.
Stephen, I should say, Strange and Stark.
Absolutely. Totally different dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So that's my kind of thing. I was like, I think watching them, it's hard for me to like, it's just the same thing, because it's not. And then any similarity is like, well, yeah, that comes with an origin story.
No, I agree with you. It's a classic origin story, and that's what it is. But it's a lazy criticism. You said it perfectly, though. It is a lazy criticism.
And I think what I like now that I've seen this and every Marvel movie up until now, I think it's more fun to see Doctor Strange interact with characters we already know than his group of characters. Like Wong, it's great to see him interact with, but I don't think he's as fun as like for me, the best Doctor Strange movie is Infinity War. Like I was just like, wow, this guy's really pulling out all the stops. He's great in this, but it's because he's like, oh, he has to interact with this person that I like, this person that I know.
Mhm.
Even in Spider-Man No Way Home, you're like, yeah, he's interacting with Spider-Man. It's nice to see him, and in this second one, interacting with Wanda, like I don't know why it is. I just find that it's way more engaging when it's like an established character from somewhere else,
Oh yeah.
rather than his. Which is why I liked that Wanda was the villain of the second movie. It was like, yeah, it's like interacting with someone we already know, and I'm as opposed to like not from the comics, but from the MCU creating a net new villain for him to go after. Because going into the second one, I was kind of like, I feel like I won't care who the villain is, and then we saw who the villain was. I'm like, now I'm on board. Like I care a lot now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, I assumed Mordo was the second villain. That's why I'm like, I don't think this
he's
is going to be
just a
strong
minor
enough.
inconvenience, unfortunately for us.
Unfortunately, yeah, he's just a little bit of a callback.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see because it seems like they're positioning Doctor Strange as like the new, I guess, tentpole, like the new Iron Man, in the sense that like he's going to be the constant throughout. So that means I'll get more of what I like, I guess, which is him interacting with characters that were established elsewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what else to say about this movie. It was a good rewatch. Like I didn't feel like it lost any steam, and cleared up the thing I had about Mordo, which was like, no, that's not an issue either, because he just had time to learn how to do this trick that we never see again, but could see later.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. My only issue with it is the dialogue of the multiversal sling ring. Yep. I take an issue with that now. I wish they said universe, but whatever. It's kind of like the Mysterio thing. Like you go back and you're like, how did he know it was 616? Lucky guess.
Maybe he had a dream about it.
Maybe. Oh, that's a good one. That's a great reason why. Damn, that was good. I like that.
I mean, he did have a whole team of scientists that were like working on it for him. And that's what is good about Mysterio, is that he's just, or the Jake Gyllenhaal aspect of it is he's the actor director, but he still has the team feeding him what needs to happen. I think they specifically show that he's not the writer, so the writer might know about that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure in that movie they talk about like, like you just give people enough of what they already know to be true that the lies don't really come off as lies anymore.
Yeah.
And if you add in like this is 616, maybe other people know that already. I don't know. Yeah. But you're right. It is interesting that they let Mysterio be right about that.
Yeah. It's well, I mean, like at that point in the universe with so much crazy stuff happening, like, yeah, he could have said like, this is my thing, this is my powers, this is what I can do. And then Fury would have been like, yeah, okay, that checks out. Because
I mean, it wasn't even really Fury. So
yeah. So it's just like, okay. It
matters even less.
Yeah. It's like, all right, I can believe that. Everything that's happened so far has been nuts. So I can totally believe that discussion. It's just, yeah, nitpicking. I want to see people theorize about how he guessed the right one.
I'm surprised there haven't been more videos about that other than just people mentioning, oh, he got it right.
Just complaining about it. Yeah. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Did you have any other nitpicks or things you liked about this movie?
I do like how they give you the Thor interaction at the end.
Because again, it's like, yeah, he's interacting with someone I already know.
Yeah, like the big tentpole thing, like you said, like he does so well bouncing back and forth between people. So more
like that he's got the gloves to hide his scars.
Yep.
The hands are so important in this movie. That is also a big through line.
Oh god, yeah, the hands, because they made like this. I remember this, like they did a featurette where like who does the hand design choreography, and it was like this guy that does like really, really good sign language and all that kind of stuff for like different languages as well. And it was like they helped design these hand gestures for him to do. And it was like such a cool, subtle part of the movie that like a lot of people would just not really notice just because like, oh, because he moves so fast
Mhm.
is all. Like you don't get to be like, oh, his pinky's doing this and slightly this and all that kind of stuff. But it is really cool to see.
Yeah, the hand gestures do feel very intentional, but also
Mhm.
because, as you said, you're kind of swept up in the whole thing of the movie. You might not linger on it, but it does look very intense. It doesn't look like he's just doing it on the fly.
Yeah. It's not like he's always giving like metal fingers
Yeah.
or, you know, or like some sort of weird hand gesture that's like an inside joke to his buddies at the Illuminati. Boom.
One last thing I'll say, it might not be the nice thing to say.
Mhm.
I now that I've seen the second one, I am kind of glad that both the writer and director did not return.
Mm.
I think the second movie for me is better, and it benefited from a bit more energy. Like I know
Yeah.
that this part of it is true in terms of the MCU kind of having a stamp on things.
Mhm.
It definitely feels way more dark and bland in
Yeah.
terms of just visually, not story wise.
Right.
Visually, which might not be the director and writer's fault, but also just it didn't feel as alive. And I think that came from, I mean, who knows, if you listen to some of Sam Raimi's interviews, which I haven't done a lot of, but it seems like he brought an energy to it that
Mhm.
benefited the story. And as I said, Michael Waldron as the writer on the second movie
Mhm.
felt like he had a bit more oomph to his writing. For me,
Yeah.
it worked better for me. So like I was kind of like, oh, that sucks that Scott Derrickson isn't coming back, but I rewatching this, I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know, like maybe the issue they were having was like he was gonna make another like okay but not great movie.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, because I do love Raimi for his horror stuff and primarily his horror stuff. And he brings so much of that flair and his energy to the
Mhm.
second one that I'm like, this is such a unique movie.
And obviously Scott Derrickson is not the same
No,
type of horror director.
no,
And
he's
I'm
not.
not saying he's a better or worse. I'm saying it's
Yeah.
very different. And
Yeah.
the one thing we said about the second one was it was so fun.
Yeah.
And I think the one what this movie does really well is world building.
Mhm.
And really establishing these characters.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we can acknowledge that Christine doesn't have much to do, but
Mhm.
the moments she's in like are really well. I think she uses what little screen time she has very effectively,
Yes.
and what it brings out of both of them, like to
Mhm.
both Stephen and Christine to be in the same scene together and interact, I think is good.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know if it seems like it worked out for everyone that they went their separate ways for the second one.
Yeah, because I agree with a lot of what you're saying, specifically, like very, very heavily about the visual stuff, right? Because in the Scott Derrickson stuff, it's like, okay, here's the visual scene where he goes from he like, oh, open your eye and you see that crazy sequence where he's going through everything like that. It
Mhm.
felt like that was the shot where it's like, we're gonna do the craziest visual stuff and we're gonna do it in that scene alone, right? It felt very isolated versus in the Sam Raimi stuff. The Sam Raimi version of going to different multiverses was A, so much wilder, and B, visually, everything in that movie, even the scenes where it's like, oh, we're walking here, there was so much visually going on, like going to that 836,
838.
838, and just being like, oh my God, the buildings here are beautiful. Look at all this nature fused in with like modern urban art, like that kind of stuff visually. Just it's a beautiful movie to watch. At this movie, I'm like, yeah, as long as I can hear the dialogue, I think I know what's going on. I don't
Mhm.
really need like it's just like and it's not to knock down the set directors or the set designers and all that kind of stuff, but it's just in the Sam Raimi one, there's visually just so much going on. When you're in Mount Wonder Bar or whatever with
Wonder Gore.
Wonder Core, I always say Wonder Bar with Elizabeth Olsen, Scarlet Witch, you're looking at all the cave like carvings and all those small details of everything, little thing in the set. Versus like this set is like, yeah, it's beautiful. Comertage is beautiful, but it's just a training facility after a while. It's not like a different universe to stare at, you know. So
Well,
the second movie
I feel
definitely
like
has that.
some people back then were like, "Holy shit, did you see that? That's the Darkhold, or did you see that?" So
Yeah,
I think
probably.
for comic fans, it's good.
Mhm.
I can't speak to that because I didn't read Doctor Strange, so I don't know that
Yeah.
world. But I do think that the second movie pops more, and maybe that's less of a whole like who knows if this was like an Ike Perlmutter movie, like
Mm,
where he had more of a hold on it.
right.
I know it came out after he left, but maybe he during production he was
Yeah, he still had his fingerprints on it or
yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
So all of that to say that I acknowledge what was probably out of both directors' control,
Mhm.
but still acknowledging that I think, in my opinion, what makes them different still shines through in both movies, even if you account for like, well, you know, so maybe sometimes they don't get to choose what happens here or whatever.
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
think that I'm happy Scott Derrickson gets to make more or maybe not personal, I'm assuming personal,
Mhm.
but less he gets to make movies with less oversight.
Mm.
And I'm glad that what is great about Sam Raimi shone through in the second Doctor Strange.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you and I were genuinely worried about that being muffled. About
I was 100% going to be like, well, I don't understand why he thinks he's going to enjoy this experience.
yeah.
And then I was like, I mean, it sounds like he didn't, but at least it doesn't look like he didn't.
Yeah. Because I was just like, yeah, he hated Spider-Man 3. Like he hated that. But then he got to put every one of his little things here. But
and why I bring
Yeah.
up the visuals is because it does sound like he is a director that likes the actual tools that you use. Like
Yes.
when you hear him talk about like we had to build the tools to make the tools that to make Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Sounds like he got to do a version of that here. Maybe not build tools, but use just better tools.
Yeah. I mean, it really shines through in a lot of his movies when he starts using practical effects, and like that's where you see the horror stuff. Because like when you watch like new age horror and it's like not practical effects, sometimes it just disengages you. But like, you know, but like even like the new Evil Dead, even though it's not directed, like I can't forget if it's directed by him, but he's producing it. The new one
the
where
show?
no, not the show.
The movie? No,
The
he
movie. He didn't direct that, right? He just produced it. But like he produced it, and that friggin' thing looks amazing. Like it just like that's all practical. Awesome. Sick. That's one of my favorites. It's so good. Yeah.
It seems to me like we've reached the end of Doctor Strange because
we have
done
stopped
Sam
talking
Raimi
about
around.
it. We have definitely talked about Raimi and Strange too, which
Yeah.
you should all go listen to.
Yeah.
Good one.
Episode 189. But yeah, we did a great talk. Let's rate Doctor Strange 1.
Yes, sir. 7.5.
I am going to give it the same, a very strong 7.5, in between a 7.5 and an 8, but probably closer to the 7.5.
Yep.
I think it's a strong entry, but obviously has been approved upon.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm glad everyone listened to this. If you're hearing this part of it, unless you skipped to this part, if you did, good for you, Robert. Otherwise, please head on over to thatshelf.com because we are part of the That Shelf podcast network with other great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels. So yeah, head on over there. You'll find those shows, our shows, more shows than even what I mentioned. It's a great time. If you want to hear older episodes of our podcast, like the Doctor Strange episode, go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. And we are on Twitter at tdfspoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, a whole bunch of different podcatchers. So please rate, review, subscribe, follow, share with your friends, comment, and otherwise be well. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.